I stood there, staring at the letter in my hand, barely able to believe what I was reading. Fishing? Seriously? They're fining me for fishing? I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. I could feel my blood start to boil. I wasn't just angry, I was seething. These HOA bastards had crossed a line. It wasn't about the fine, it wasn't even about the damn fishing, really. It was about control. They thought they could dictate how I spend my time on my own land, land I inherited from my grandfather, land that had been passed down through generations, and now these entitled bureaucrats thought they could just waltz in and impose their ridiculous rules. I crumpled the letter up in my fist, slamming it into the trash. "You don't know who you're messing with," I muttered to myself, taking a deep breath to calm the storm inside me. They didn't just take on some random guy, they'd messed with the wrong person. You see, fishing isn't just a hobby for me. It's my family's legacy. My grandfather taught me to fish right here, on this very lake. When I was a kid, that was our time to talk, to share stories, to be at peace. When he passed away, I didn't just inherit this land, I inherited those memories. Every ripple in the water, every cast of the line, was a piece of him. But now they want to take that piece from me, not on my watch. Let me introduce myself. I'm Ethan Carter. You might think I'm just some rich guy with nothing better to do than fish, but you're wrong. I built everything I have from the ground up. I didn't get here by following the rules. I got here by breaking the mold, by standing up when people tried to control me. And if they think they can just fine me for fishing, they're about to find out just how far I'm willing to go to fight back. I'm not just gonna take this. I'm gonna show them what happens when you mess with someone who's got everything to lose and nothing to back down for. So if you think you've seen the last of me, think again. Stick around, comment below and let me know what you think is going to happen next. And trust me, this is just the beginning. I've got a plan, and these HOA bastards, they won't know what hit them. It's hard to put into words what this place means to me. When my grandfather first bought this property, it wasn't just for the house, it was for the lake. He used to tell me that the water held stories, that every time he cast a line he was reeling in memories. The sounds of the lake were the soundtrack to my childhood, and I spent more weekends than I could count sitting on the edge of that dock with him. He taught me everything I know about life and the importance of holding on to what matters most. I remember the first time he took me fishing. It was early, just as the sun was rising, and everything was still. He looked over at me and said, "This lake, Ethan, it's more than just water, it's the foundation of our family. When you catch a fish, you're pulling in something bigger than just the catch. You're pulling in the past, the present, and the future. And now they want to take it from me. Over a damn fine for fishing. No, not gonna happen. You're going to want to see how this goes down. Trust me, this is only the start." Comment below if you think I'm gonna take these HOA jerks down, because I promise you, this isn't going to end like they think. And don't blink, this is about to get real. As I stood there watching the sun set over the lake, the quiet hum of the water seemed almost mocking. My eyes narrowed, focusing on the gentle ripples that disrupted the same surface where I had cast my line 100 times with my grandfather. It wasn't just water, it was history. My history. But now it was something more. A battleground. The HOA wanted to control it. They wanted to dictate how and when I could fish on what was rightfully mine. And that I would not stand for. I couldn't just sit back and let them get away with it. Not now. Not ever. I had worked too hard to build my empire. To have someone, especially the HOA, come in and destroy what mattered most to me. They'd be sorry. I had a plan. A way to outsmart them, but it had to start somewhere. I turned away from the lake, my gaze shifting toward the house behind me. I could almost hear my grandfather's voice again, whispering through the years, "Don't let anyone take what's yours, Ethan. And don't fight just for the fight. Fight smart." Smart. Yeah, that was the key. This wasn't going to be a street brawl. This was going to be chess. I walked back into my study, where my desk was already littered with papers, blueprints, legal documents, old receipts, and some research I'd started on the HOA. I was done with waiting for someone else to handle this. I wasn't just fighting for the lake anymore. I was fighting for my grandfather's legacy, and I'd do whatever it took to win. The phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced down at it. Sarah Martin, my lawyer. I picked it up without hesitation. "Ethan," she said, her voice calm but with a sharp edge. "You know this is going to get messy, right? The HOA won't back down just because you don't want to follow their rules." "I don't care," I said, leaning back in the chair. They've crossed a line, and I'm not just going to let them walk all over me. I'm going to take them down piece by piece. Sarah let out a low sigh. I've been looking into their records. They've had some questionable tactics in the past. You're not the first to take them on, Ethan, but you may be the one who finally brings them to their knees. That's the plan, I said, my voice steady, but I'm not just going to fight them in court. I'm going to hit them where it hurts the most. Where? She asked, curious. Their power, I replied, as I grabbed a stack of papers off the desk and spread them out in front of me. I'm going to take away their influence, make them irrelevant. You said it yourself. The HOA has had a hand in pushing around people for years. Well, it's my turn now. I hung up the phone, the gears already turning in my mind. It wasn't just about the lake anymore. It was about showing the HOA that they had no right to treat people like cattle. It was about putting them in their place, once and for all. The next morning, I drove into town. The drive was longer than usual, but it gave me time to think. As I passed the familiar sights, the town hall, the old diner, the local park, I couldn't shake the feeling that the entire town had been walking on eggshells for far too long. Everyone was so afraid to rock the boat, to stand up to the HOA. I understood that fear. Hell, I'd even felt it myself when I first moved back here. But that was before I knew what I was capable of. That was before I understood just how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine. The first thing I did was call a few of the neighbors. People I knew had been frustrated with the HOA, but hadn't had the means to challenge them. There was Mark, the single dad who'd been slapped with fines for having an unkempt lawn. Jane, the elderly widow who had received notices for something as trivial as leaving her garbage cans out too long. And then there was Lisa, who had gotten into a feud with the HOA over her garden. One by one, I asked them to meet me at the diner. I knew that with the right leverage, I could rally them to my side. It wouldn't be easy. The HOA had conditioned people to fear them, but I wasn't afraid of them. Not anymore. We met over coffee, a small group of disgruntled homeowners, each of us looking for a way to fight back. You really think you can take on the HOA? Mark asked, skepticism in his voice. I'm not just thinking about it, Mark, I said, leaning forward. I'm doing it, but I need you to help me. If we all stand together, we can make them back down. This is about more than a fine. This is about all of us fighting for our rights, for our homes. Lisa nodded slowly, her voice quiet. I've had enough. They keep poking at me, making rules that don't make sense. They can't keep doing this to us. Exactly, I said. This isn't just my fight, it's ours. We're going to make them realize they can't push people around anymore. By the time the meeting ended, we had a plan. It wasn't much yet, but it was a start. We would gather evidence, anything we could find that showed how the HOA had overstepped its bounds. I would get the legal side of things in motion, and we'd find ways to pressure them in ways they hadn't anticipated. I walked back to my car feeling a little lighter. The weight of the battle was still there, heavy on my shoulders, but I had a team now. A team of people who understood that this wasn't just about one man standing up to authority. It was about reclaiming what was ours. It felt good to be the one people could count on. It felt right to be the one leading the charge. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was making progress. The first few days after the meeting with my neighbors were busy. The plan was starting to take shape, but it wasn't going to be easy. I had no illusions about that. The HOA wasn't going to roll over just because I asked them to. If anything, they were going to fight back harder. But this wasn't about getting into a shouting match. It was about strategy. That's how I was going to win this. I sat at my desk in the study, flipping through the legal documents Sarah had sent over. She was good, sharp, methodical, and more than willing to take on the HOA's legal team. I could already see how this was going to unfold. The HOA would try to intimidate, maybe issue a few more fines, but they had one major problem. They didn't know who they were dealing with. I pulled up the HOA's records on my laptop, combing through everything I could find. There had to be something, anything that would give me leverage. A crack in their armor. A misstep that would open the door for me to take them down once and for all. I wasn't looking for some legal loophole. I was looking for a pattern. A way to show that this wasn't just a personal attack on me. It was a system of oppression that affected everyone in the neighborhood. The phone buzzed on the desk again. It was Sarah. I picked it up immediately. Ethan, she said, her tone measured but with a hint of excitement. I found something interesting. The HOA has been pushing fines for minor infractions, but they've been selectively enforcing them. Some residents are getting hit hard, while others are ignored entirely. That's exactly what I was looking for, I replied, leaning forward. How many people are we talking about? Quite a few. I've got a list. Some of them have already reached out to me, asking about what they can do. They're afraid to speak out, but they've been paying these fines for years, and it's clear the HOA is picking favorites. Perfect, I said, smiling to myself. We can use this. This is exactly the ammunition I need. If they've been selectively enforcing rules, that's not just an overstep, it's illegal, and it's time we shine a light on it. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, emails, and meetings. I got in touch with every neighbor who had been affected by the HOA's heavy-handed tactics, from the single mom with the unkempt yard to the retired couple who'd been fined for having their mailbox too far from the curb. It didn't matter how small the infraction, if the HOA was playing favorites, I was going to expose them. By the end of the week, I had a list of over 20 residents who had been unfairly fined or harassed. People who had kept quiet out of fear, who hadn't wanted to rock the boat. But now they were ready to fight. I'd also done my homework on the HOA board members. I'd learned more about their history, their personal connections, and their business dealings. They might have been good at hiding their wrongdoings, but not good enough. The more I dug, the more cracks I found in their polished facade. I wasn't going to just expose them legally. I was going to make sure everyone in the neighborhood knew who they really were. People had a right to know what was happening behind closed doors. I'd had enough of playing by their rules. It was time to rewrite the playbook. By the time I met Sarah at the diner, I had everything I needed. We sat down in the booth, the weight of what I was about to do hanging in the air. "You're ready, right?" Sarah asked, glancing at the stack of papers I placed on the table. "More than ready," I said, a grin spreading across my face. "This is going to be good, but it's going to take everything we've got. I'm not just going to expose the HOA, I'm going to make sure they never pull something like this again. I want them to know what happens when you mess with the wrong person." She nodded. "I've been working on the legal side. I've got a case to show how they've been violating state laws about selective enforcement. But you're right, it's not just about the law, it's about getting the community to stand with you." I leaned back in the booth, feeling the adrenaline rush through me. Exactly. They can't hide behind their fancy bylaws forever. We've got the truth on our side, Sarah, and that's a weapon they can't fight. The following week, we took the first step, sending a formal complaint to the HOA. It wasn't just a letter, it was a declaration. We laid out all the violations, all the evidence, and all the instances where the HOA had abused its power. But that was just the beginning. I wasn't going to let them ignore this. I wanted them to feel the pressure every step of the way. I made sure the press got wind of it. A few well-placed calls to local reporters, and soon enough the HOA's dirty laundry was being aired for the public to see. The story went viral. Everyone in town was talking about it, but the real fun hadn't even started yet. So, what do you think? You think the HOA is going to back down? Think again. This is just the first step, and I'm not stopping here. The next few weeks felt like a whirlwind. Every move I made was calculated. Every word I said was deliberate. I knew this fight wouldn't be quick. The HOA had power, and they weren't about to let it go without a serious pushback. But I wasn't here to play nice. I was here to break their grip on this neighborhood. I couldn't afford to make a misstep. I'd done my homework, and now it was time to put everything into motion. It started with the press. The local news outlets picked up the story about the HOA's selective enforcement of rules. They were running with it, and as expected, it spread like wildfire. Articles, blog posts, even social media posts from angry neighbors flooded the internet. The HOA's shiny, clean reputation had started to crack, but I knew better than to think that would make them back down. In fact, it might have only pissed them off more. That's when I hit them with the legal notice. I didn't just want to scare them, I wanted them to feel it, every single bit of the consequences of their actions. It wasn't enough to tell them what they'd done wrong. I had to make sure they knew I wasn't afraid of the fight, and that I could make it as messy as they wanted. My lawyer Sarah had prepared the official complaint, but I wasn't content just sending it through normal channels. I wanted the HOA board to see it up close and personal. I hand-delivered the complaint to their office. The look on the receptionist's face when I walked through the door was priceless. She tried to act professional, but I could see the panic behind her eyes as I handed her the thick stack of legal documents. "You can make sure the board gets this, right?" I asked, My voice calm but firm. Her lips tightened as she took the papers. Of course, Mr. Carter, right away. As I turned to leave, I could feel their gaze following me. The storm had just begun, and I was the one bringing it. A couple of days later, I was back at the diner, meeting with Sarah to strategize the next phase. She was already on top of the paperwork, but I needed more. I needed the public to really feel this, because I wasn't going to let the HOA slip away quietly. "We're making progress," Sarah said, her voice calm but with the same sharp edge I'd heard when we first started this fight. "The media's been eating it up, and the more people we can get on our side, the better." "Good," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. "But we need to push harder. We need to make sure that the HOA is the one on the defensive, and not just legally. We need to expose them for what they really are. Let the neighbors know this isn't just about me, it's about all of us. They've been bullying people for too long." Sarah nodded. "I've been in touch with some of the other neighbors. A few more are willing to speak up. The pressure's starting to build." "Perfect," I replied, a grin tugging at the corner of my mouth. "Now we take it to the next level. I want to organize a town hall. Get all the residents who are sick of the HOA to show up. But we're not just going to sit there quietly and complain. We're going to come with a plan to take back control of this neighborhood." The town hall was set for the following week, and by the time the evening arrived, I was ready. I knew the HOA was going to try and shut this down. They'd probably show up, trying to intimidate everyone with their polished speeches and empty threats, but I was ready for them. When I arrived at the community center, I was surprised by how many people had shown up. The room was packed. People were sitting, standing, chatting in small groups. Everyone looked eager to finally voice their frustrations. But there was something else in the air, a sense of unity, of purpose. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us. The meeting started, and sure enough, Karen Hill was there, sitting front and center, arms crossed, face as rigid as a brick wall. She was wearing her usual mask of control, but I could see the cracks forming. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to people actually standing up to her. I took a deep breath, stood up, and walked to the front. The room went silent, all eyes on me. I could feel the weight of the moment, but I didn't let it faze me. I had a message to deliver, and I wasn't going to let anything stop me. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice carrying through the room. "I'm Ethan Carter, and I've been fighting this HOA for the past few weeks. But this fight isn't just mine. It's all of ours. The HOA has been overstepping its bounds for years. They've been fining people for trivial things, harassing good, hard-working families, and controlling this neighborhood like it's their personal fiefdom. But that ends today." The room was silent, and then slowly a few heads nodded. People were listening. "I've already filed a legal complaint against the HOA," I continued, feeling the surge of confidence grow. "I've gathered evidence, and we've got the media on our side. But this isn't just about fighting in the courts. This is about us taking control. We're going to hold them accountable, not just legally, but publicly. We're going to let everyone know who they really are." I paused for a moment, scanning the room, faces full of hope, some eyes still filled with fear, but all of them ready to fight. "We're going to make sure this never happens again. The HOA is going to have to answer for what they've done, but we're not going to just win. We're going to take back our neighborhood, together." There was a moment of silence, and then the room erupted in applause. People were standing, clapping, some shouting words of support. For the first time, it felt like the tide was truly turning. The HOA had been the bully, but now the tables had turned. As I looked around the room, I knew we weren't just fighting for one man's lake anymore. We were fighting for everyone's rights. And that felt damn good. If you're with me, comment below and let me know. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around for the next move. It's about to get real. The weeks that followed felt like a blur. Every day there was something new: emails, meetings, press coverage, each piece falling into place like a well-oiled machine. The momentum was undeniable, and the HOA was starting to feel the pressure. They couldn't ignore it anymore. The media had picked up the story, and the neighbors were starting to speak out. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. The HOA had responded to our public outcry with their usual arrogance. Karen Hill, the HOA president, issued a statement claiming they were within their rights, denying any allegations of selective enforcement, and accusing me of stirring up unnecessary trouble. It was a predictable move, but I wasn't worried. They didn't realize that the more they pushed back, the more they revealed their true nature. I'd been preparing for this moment, but I needed one final push. The Teon Hall had been a huge success. People were starting to take notice, and the cracks in the HOA's pristine image were becoming more visible every day. The real test would come in the form of the official meeting scheduled for the next week, their last chance to silence me before things got worse. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the pile of legal documents spread out in front of me. The complaint, the evidence, the violations, I had it all. And Sarah, my lawyer, had been working tirelessly to ensure that every aspect of their corruption was exposed. This wasn't just a battle for the lake anymore. It was about showing everyone how the HOA had been abusing its power for years unchecked. Sarah, I said, glancing at the phone on my desk, we're not just going to win, we're going to bury them. I'm ready, she said, her voice sharp, but we need to make sure the board doesn't try to use their power to shut this down before it goes to court. I've been getting calls from some of the neighbors. They're scared. They think Karen and the rest of the board will retaliate if they keep pushing. They're scared of what they don't understand, I replied, my voice low and steady. And we're going to show them that this fight isn't just about us, it's about everyone. We're taking control back. That night, I made a call, the final piece of the puzzle. The meeting the HOA had scheduled was supposed to be their last attempt to publicly humiliate me, to shut me down before the legal battle went any further. I wasn't going to let them. I wasn't going to let Karen Hill and her cronies dictate the narrative anymore. I was going to turn the tables, expose them for the frauds they were, and take away their power. The next day, I gathered a group of neighbors who had been with me from the start. We met at my place before heading to the HOA meeting, each of us holding something, a piece of evidence, a story, a truth that had been hidden for too long. You ready for this? I asked, looking around the room. Hell yeah, Mark said, grinning. They've been bullying us for too long. Time to turn the tables. I never thought I'd see the day, Lisa added, her voice quiet but determined. But I'm with you, all the way. I felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It wasn't just about one man standing up for what was his. This was a community finally coming together to fight back against the people who had been running their lives behind the scenes. And I was going to lead them. I was going to make sure that this fight was one we'd all win. When we arrived at the community center, the atmosphere was tense. The HOA board was already seated at the front, their faces grim, their eyes narrowed at us as we walked in. Karen Hill, of course, was front and center, as if she were the queen of the room. I couldn't help but notice the smugness in her smile. She thought she had us cornered. She thought she had the upper hand. But she was wrong. I stood at the podium, facing the board. The room was packed with residents, all eager to hear what was going to happen next. A few of the HOA supporters sat scattered throughout the crowd, their eyes watching me with suspicion. But the majority, they were on our side. We're here today because the HOA has crossed a line, I began, my voice calm but firm. They've been selectively enforcing rules, fining people for the smallest infractions, and using their power to control the residents of this neighborhood. They've bullied and manipulated their way to the top, but that stops now. The room was quiet, all eyes on me. I've gathered evidence, I've spoken to neighbors, and I've done my homework. The HOA has broken the law, they've violated residents' rights, and they've done it time and time again without consequence. I paused for effect, letting the words sink in. Karen's face had gone pale, her jaw tight. She was fighting to maintain her composure, but I could see the cracks. She knew the truth was coming for her. You don't get to bully people anymore, Karen, I said, turning my gaze toward her. You don't get to threaten the people in this room. You don't get to take control of what belongs to all of us. This fight isn't just about me, it's about everyone who's been crushed under the weight of your rules. And I'm not stopping until we've taken back what's ours. The room erupted into applause. A few people stood, clapping, cheering. The HOA was on the defensive now, their control slipping away by the second. Karen Hill stood up, her face red with anger. You're going too far, Ethan, she spat. This is a private matter. You don't have the right to. I don't have the right, I interrupted, my voice rising. I've got every right to speak up. I've got every right to fight for what's mine, and what's everyone else's. You've pushed too far, Karen, and now the world is watching. I stepped away from the podium, letting the room's energy carry the message. The HOA was finished, they just didn't know it yet. So, what do you think? You think they can still fight back? I don't think so. The tide has turned, and we're taking back control. Leave a comment below. Let me know if you think Karen's about to get what she deserves. Stay tuned. This fight isn't over yet. The weeks after the town hall were a blur. The HOA's initial response to my public challenge had been one of defiance. Karen Hill's arrogant refusal to back down only fueled the fire. But with every day that passed, the pressure mounted. The residents were rallying behind me, and the more I exposed the HOA's shady tactics, the more cracks appeared in their impenetrable armor. I'd been preparing for this. The legal battles were inevitable, but I knew the key to winning wasn't just in courtrooms or in media headlines. It was in community support. It was about creating a movement, and I had done that. By the time the first court date rolled around, the HOA's board was visibly rattled. The case had gained enough momentum that they couldn't simply ignore it anymore. They'd tried to dismiss the evidence, calling it trivial, accusing me of playing a public relations game rather than seeking justice. But it was too late. The tide had turned, and it wasn't going to stop. I met Sarah the morning of the hearing, outside the courthouse. She was calm as usual, but I could see the flicker of excitement in her eyes. This was it. This was the moment we'd been fighting for. "You ready for this?" she asked. Her voice steady but with a touch of that anticipation I knew so well. I smiled. "Always. Let's make sure they never forget who they're dealing with." The court hearing was packed. People I didn't even know had shown up to support me. Neighbors, local reporters, even a few lawyers who were curious about the case. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the people who had been taken advantage of by the HOA for years. People who had finally found their voice. As we walked into the courtroom, I couldn't help but feel a rush of pride. This was bigger than I ever imagined it could be. I wasn't just taking down a group of overzealous bureaucrats. I was fighting for the future of this neighborhood. I was fighting for fairness, and I wasn't going to lose. The judge called the room to order, and the case began. The HOA's defense was predictably weak. They tried to argue that their selective enforcement was justified, that it was within their right to regulate how the neighborhood functioned. But the more they spoke, the more their arguments fell apart. I had evidence. Sarah had done her part, and I was ready to hammer home the truth. I stood to address the court, my voice steady and clear. "Your Honor, what we're dealing with here is more than just an issue of fines. This is about power. The HOA has been using its authority to control residents, to pick and choose who they want to enforce their rules against, while letting others slide by. I have shown the court evidence of these discrepancies. These people," I gestured toward the crowd of neighbors, "are not here to fight for personal gain. They're here because they've had enough of being treated like second-class citizens in their own homes. They're here because they want to live in a community, not under the thumb of a corrupt organization." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle in the room. We've seen the truth, and today, I'm asking the court to make that truth known. The silence that followed was deafening. The HOA's lawyers didn't know how to respond. They were out of options. The judge, a seasoned professional with no tolerance for nonsense, looked at the evidence, and then at the board members who sat there, their faces ashen. Finally, the judge spoke. "The evidence here is clear. The HOA has been selectively enforcing its rules and violating residents' rights. The court finds in favor of the plaintiffs. This case is closed, and the HOA will be required to address its practices immediately." The room erupted into applause. I couldn't believe it. Victory was ours. But it wasn't just mine. It was the victory of every neighbor who had been wronged, every person who had lived under the HOA's oppressive thumb for too long. This was their win as much as it was mine. The aftermath of the court ruling was swift. The HOA was forced to change its policies, to offer compensation to those who had been unfairly fined, and most importantly to give up any claim to the power they had abused. Karen Hill resigned, as did several other board members. They were done, but the victory didn't stop there. The neighborhood was changing. The sense of fear that had once gripped everyone was dissipating. People were talking, connecting, sharing their experiences. For the first time in years, the community felt like a real community again. As I sat in my living room later that evening, looking out over the lake, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. My grandfather would have been proud. The legacy he had left me wasn't just about this land or this house. It was about fighting for what's right. It was about protecting what matters most. And that's exactly what I had done. The lake, once just a peaceful retreat, was now a symbol of victory. A symbol of what can happen when you stand up for yourself. I leaned back in my chair, smiling to myself. I had done it. I had taken back what was mine, and I wasn't about to let anyone forget it. The dust had finally settled, but the aftershocks of the battle lingered in the air. The HOA had been dismantled, piece by piece, Karen Hill was gone, as were the other board members who had been so sure of their power. The rules that had once ruled over the neighborhood like an iron fist were now a thing of the past, and the neighborhood, well, it was never going to be the same. I stood by the lake again, as I often did now, the soft ripples glistening in the sunlight. I'd spent countless hours fishing here, thinking, reflecting on the victory. It wasn't just about the battle I had fought, it was about what came after. The victory felt satisfying, but I knew I wasn't finished. There was still more to do. I wasn't just the man who had taken on the HOA anymore. I was the man who had inspired an entire neighborhood to reclaim what was theirs. I had brought the community together, turned them from a group of scared residents into a unified front. We had fought back, and we had won. But the real work was just beginning. The phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Sarah. "Hey Ethan," she said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of professionalism mixed with a hint of something deeper, something earned. "I think you need to hear this. The HOA board's gone, but there are still things we need to deal with." "What do you mean?" I asked, already feeling the familiar edge of tension creep into my body. "We weren't finished, were we?" "They've tried to fight it, Ethan. There's still some legal stuff to iron out, compensation for the residents who were fined, the changes to the bylaws. We've got a meeting with the new board next week, and they're still going to try and make things right. But you know as well as I do, it's not enough to just remove them. We've got to make sure they never get this kind of control again." I let out a slow breath. She was right. We'd taken down the board, but we couldn't let the same situation happen again. "Let's make sure it sticks this time," I said. "No more HOA nonsense." "Agreed," Sarah replied. "I'll keep you posted. And Ethan, yeah, you're not just a homeowner anymore. You're a hero in this community. People are still talking about what you did." I paused, looking at the lake, the wind tugging gently at my shirt. "It wasn't just me, Sarah, this was all of us." A week later, I stood in front of the newly elected community board in the same meeting room where everything had started. The energy was different now, charged with excitement, a sense of purpose. Gone were the days of whispers and fear. Now there was open discussion, plans for the future, and a new sense of freedom. The new board was composed of a few familiar faces, people who had supported me from the start, people who had the same passion for this neighborhood's future that I did. No longer would we stand idly by while a few power-hungry individuals tried to control our lives. This was our community. We were taking back control, not just of the lake, but of our rights as residents. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the people who had fought this battle alongside me. Mark, Lisa, Jane, all of them had shown up today, standing tall, ready to move forward. But it wasn't just about what we had won. It was about ensuring that what happened to us never happened again. "We've got to make sure that the HOA's mistakes aren't just forgotten," I said as I addressed the group. "We have the chance to set a new precedent here. We've been given a second chance to live the way we want, the way we deserve, but we can't forget what happened." The new board members nodded in agreement, and for the first time I could see a real shift in the room. There were no more threats, no more manipulation, there was only the drive to build a better future. The finality of it hit me as the meeting concluded. It was over, we'd won, the neighborhood was free. But there was no time to rest on our laurels. We had to continue fighting for what was ours, protecting it, preserving it. We were responsible for this new chapter, and it was up to us to make sure it didn't turn into the nightmare it had been before. Later that evening, I stood by the lake watching the colors of the sunset dance across the water. There was a peace here, a kind of stillness, but it wasn't the same peace I had known before. It wasn't just quiet, it was earned. I thought about my grandfather, about the lessons he had taught me. He had always said, "This land is your birthright, Ethan. You fight for it, and you protect it, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you." I hadn't understood it fully back then. But now it made sense. I wasn't just protecting a piece of land. I was protecting a community, a future. I was fighting for something that mattered, and that was everything. If you're watching this and dealing with your own HOA nightmare, remember, when you fight back with strategy, you can take control. Never let them dictate your life. Drop a comment below. Let's see if you're ready to take on your HOA and win.